It has been a long time since I did a review or critique video, and if I'm honest, that is considered the dark times for good reason.
And you had to do oh, I'm gone. Don't move! Oh, you're fucked. Oh my god. Just stay still.
I am.
Stay still, Sedge.
I am.
Stay still.
I am.
Shh, shh. He doesn't notice.
Oh my god. Yeah, get that out of here. No one needs to see that. Maybe under the impression that I might have terrible memories of my time with Aliens games. And if we were doing Colonial Marines again, I would absolutely agree with you. Fortunately, I am comforted by fond memories of Alien vs. Predator 2 created by Monolith. If we ignore Primal Hunt, which was made by Third Law Interactive, just I'm not a big fan of that expansion's gameplay choices. So AVP 2 is my high watermark for any game set in the Aliens universe.
No way, somebody tell me that's just a boot. That better be a boot. Hey, it's a boot!
I've always had a love affair with the Aliens universe. Even bought the original trilogy box set and listened to the director's commentary, where I learned some interesting things. Like, turns out Ripley is very thirsty for them Xenomorphs.
There were a couple things she asked me if she could do when we had our very first meeting. She wanted to die in the film, she wanted to not use guns, and she wanted to make love to the alien. And between the third and fourth film, she got to do all of those things. But fortunately for this film, I said no to all of them. Even though I was petrified about the result, I thought, you know, she'd bolt from the project. But she didn't.
With those amusing asides out of the way, let's talk a bit about the studio behind the game. I certainly hope you will find this little history lesson interesting and put into perspective the studio working on this project. Cold Iron Studios, or Cold Iron, was originally started in 2015 by 3 Cryptic Studios veterans, and I'll put their names on the screen because, well, you're about to hear in a second. Craig Zinkiewicz, Shannon Pozniewski, and Matt Hyacin, who all had several years under their belts working on MMO projects for Cryptic Studios, at various positions within the company. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if it's the third name people tell me I mispronounce, and not the first two? The original aim of Cold Iron Studios was to create their own online action game, set in a sci-fi world to compete in the AAA market space. After all, the team was made up of veterans of MMO development from their days at Cryptic Studios. Yet this project was put on hold when Fox Entertainment bought the company in 2018 and shifted them on to creating an Aliens game under Fox Next Games. The scope of this Aliens project seemed incredibly ambitious, promising that it will explore areas of the universe that fans haven't got to experience. Then Cold Iron was transferred to Disney, along with the Fox Next brand, before again being sold in August 2020 to Daybreak Games, which itself was bought by a Swedish games holding company known as Enad Global 7 in December of that year. Somehow, and I've yet to find out how, Cold Iron is now with Focus Home Interactive after the purchase of Daybreak. With so many changes of ownership and shifting priorities, it would be a wonder if the studio would ever get a game out the door. This brings us to Aliens Fireteam Elite, their very first game release ever, which they scaled back from being a AAA title and instead made a AA experience. So, how does Aliens Fireteam Elite hold up in the Aliens universe? Well, let's lock and load, Marines, and find out. The year is 2202, and you are a UACM aboard the UAS Endeavour. In 2184, Weyland-Yutani tried to spark a shooting war between the Union of Progressive Peoples and the United Americas to try and sell advanced weaponry to both sides in what became known as the Frontier War. This war caused the United Americas to sign the Colonial Protection Act, stripping the Colonial Marines from the grasp of the corporations and giving the Marines authority to protect all civilians in the frontier against all threats, be it corporations or Xenomorphs alike. Wait, did I say the UACM and not the USCM? Well, after the Frontier War, the United Americas Assembly decided to get serious about recruitment from all areas of the United Americas, and not just the United States and Canada, thus rebranding the Colonial Marines from the United States Colonial Marines into the United Americas Colonial Marines. Species XX-121, also known as Xenomorphs, are a known threat to the Marines, and thus they have begun to tailor their operations to combat this threat. They have reorganized their force into rapid responders, attempting to conduct rescue operations, and taking special quarantine measures to prevent the Xenomorphs from spreading. So, how is Weyland-Yutani still around and able to operate freely after being caught in the Frontier War? Well, when you make up over a third of the economy of the UA, nearly the entire military force of the Three Worlds Empire, and have huge stakes in the UPP, it's kind of hard to make you go away. Hence the need for the Colonial Protection Act as a check on their power, allowing the Colonial Marines to get in and get the job done without having to worry about the repercussions. At least on paper.
Oh.
Nice.
Barely. Cool. Got a burster out the back. Nice play, bro. Alright, reloading.
Copy. Big ones! Is that... No strikes. Grenade out.
Burster's coming in. Oh, I've been grabbed. I've been grabbed.
It's a sizzle reel, get it? You know, because of the acid and everything, and how it... Yeah, never mind, we're moving on. Aliens Fireteam Elite is a multiplayer-based game in the genre colloquially referred to as a co-op horde shooter, or wave shooter. To this end, you can either choose to make your lobbies public or private, and naturally can invite your friends into your game. However, it is worth noting that at the time of this review, you cannot join a mission that is in progress, meaning any disconnects or late joins who want to come along will have to wait until you return to the Endeavor before they can actually join up. When going into a private game, solo or without a full 3-man team, you'll be given combat synths named Alpha or Beta to fill in your roster. These are simplistic AI that act much like the Gunner class without the overclock ability. Don't worry, we will be going into classes soon. While going into multiplayer, you can choose the mission and difficulty you want to attempt, and the game will begin searching for lobbies to put you in. Once in a game, the mission will give you an indicator of its challenge level by stating what combat gear is appropriate for the mission and difficulty. You can think of this as your gear score, a general measure of your weapons, perks, and levels. When playing the game, there are currently 6 different classes you can play as. 4 unlocked from the start, with a new one added in as free DLC, and 1 unlocking after you finish the entire campaign, which also serves to unlock Horde mode. This mode, at time of writing, is a very simple one, with only a single map so far, that does not allow challenge card usage, which we will discuss later, and should be thought of as more of a test of your builds under extreme duress, with some special unlocks for getting through at least wave 10 on different difficulties. For each wave you clear, you're given resources to spend at a nearby requisition locker to help ease things along the way. Unlike most co-op horde shooters, you actually have classes with their own special abilities and loadouts that can be synergized to make a more effective team. These classes are as follows. Gunner. This class can be thought of as your extreme damage dealer with the abilities Fragmentation Grenade to help clear Xenos and Overclock, which gives a group-wide buff to firing rate and gives the gunner a faster reload speed. Their passive ability is known as Stay on Target, which gives you a damage buff that continues to stack up to 10 times so long as you are doing damage already. The class focuses on rifles and close quarter weapons, hereafter known as CQW, and tend to focus their firepower onto single targets. However, with the way the game is set up, you can use the various perks found in the game to change Fragmentation Grenade to an Incendiary Blast to do quick damage to enemies in a cone in front of you, or make it a remote detonator, which allows you to throw it out and detonate it when you choose or after a small delay, and can even stick it to target directly. Don't worry, we'll be talking about perks in its own section following classes. This is perhaps the most straightforward class, but you can create interesting builds to synergize around specific weapon choices to maximize the pain against specific targets. Demolisher, the big one. The class most recognizable alongside the standard gunner. They use rifles and heavy weapons, including the iconic smart gun. When starting out, they are horde clearers, using the smart gun or heavy weapons to thin out swarms alongside their abilities. The first of which being micro rockets, which fire from shoulder-mounted launchers and can be upgraded to napalm that fire far more, yet smaller rockets to leave pools of fire, or concussive, which do way less damage but are guaranteed to knock down anything hit by the blast. Their second ability is known as Blast Wave, where they throw a concussion grenade at the ground, sending all enemies around them flying back and staggering them. This makes the Demolisher a very good AoE class, yet don't think it only excels at horde clearance. Its core passive ability is called Clear the Room, which is a stacking damage buff from using abilities and based on the number of enemies said abilities manage to hit. Which means with some proper perk arrangements and weapons, the Demolisher can absolutely destroy special and elite enemies very quickly. Technician. What at first to be only a support class, the Technician uses handguns and CQW, along with their first ability, Sentry Gun, which starts as a burst fire machine gun. This can be upgraded to either a heavy turret, which makes it a single-shot sniper, or into Incinerator, which makes it a short-range but rapid-attacking flamethrower turret. The standard turret is fine on its own, and the flamethrower turret is amazing, though I haven't found a really good build for the heavy turret yet. Their second ability, and what makes them such a good support class, is called Charged Coils, which can be thrown at any surface and leaves an AoE electrical field that slows all enemies down. However, if you manage to throw a coil directly onto an enemy, it sticks to them, making it a mobile slow, and keeps that specific target slowed for the entire charge coil duration. The core passive for this class is Cross-Platform Synergy, which makes allies around your turret take 10% less damage, and should you stay near your turret, allows the turret to repair itself and stay in the fight longer. Yet I alluded to the fact that this wasn't just a support class. Well, build your perks and weapons right, and the Technician can actually become one of the most devastating elite killers. Charge Coil slowing their target down while granting massive damage bonuses to the Technician, their turret, and teammates, allowing you to burn down the most deadly foes. Doc. This class is pretty much what it says on the tin, except think less pure healer and more mad scientist with healing capabilities, and a syringe full of go-go juice to buff the team's capabilities in combat. First and foremost, the class gets the Trauma Station, which comes with a set amount of charge that can only be refilled by having the doc pick up a new aid kit. This will constantly heal any Marine or UACM synth that stands within the designated circle. This Trauma Station can be upgraded into Painkiller, which gives gun handling and damage resistance, but comes with 20% less charge, or Suppression, which slows all enemies within the radius and reduces the amount of damage they do. Starting to see some good crowd control potential already? The second ability they get is called Combat Stems, which increases accuracy and stability by 50%. Stamina regen by 30%, and movement speed by 15% for you and nearby allies. This can be modified to have additional effects from the perk system as well. Their core passive ability is called Field Medic, that for each nearby ally your abilities recharge 15% faster, and picking up any aid kits will restore some energy to your Trauma Station. This means that staying near allies to get combat stems up faster, and also being the designated healer to pick up as many med kits as possible, will keep this a very strong class at all difficulties. Recon. A class that on paper seems like it would be useless, until you start doing the harder difficulties, at which point it feels vital to the success of your mission. Its first ability is Pups, Perimeter Uplink Spectrograph, that reveals nearby enemies to your entire team and reduces their damage by 20% for a short duration. On higher difficulties, not only are enemies more lethal, thus the damage becomes far more pressing to mitigate, but they are no longer outlined. Pups can be upgraded to either Bloodhound, which will send the pups to target a specific enemy, revealing them and lowering their defenses, or Guard Dog, which sits at the activated area, slows enemies, and occasionally sends out an electrical shock to do some damage to anything nearby it. The second and even more critical ability the Recon gets is Support Drone, which buffs allies within the designated area by giving them 20% bonuses to accuracy and stability, gives them back some health on kill, and gives them ammo drops at set intervals. The amount of ammo can be increased by increasing the length support drone is active through perks. You can even give the support drone a damage resistance aura and increase the healing it gives as well. Both of these abilities make the recon an absolute godsend on high difficulties, wherein things like friendly fire is enabled, reduced max ammunition capacity, outlines on enemies go away, enemies have more health and deal more damage, there's less time to revive down teammates, and enemy grapples are much harder to escape from. Phalanx. Hot off the press is the newest class on the block, a literal walking tank of a class equipped with a retractable shield and focusing on the use of handguns and CQW. That's right, you can one-hand shotguns Terminator style, and most amusingly a lot of the reload animations were considered when having the shield out. My favorite being the pistol slide rack by catching it on your holster and jerking the gun down. The first ability is the ever-present shield known as Shield Up, which will block most damage from the front. This includes things like warriors in your face and slashing at you, blocking the entire amount of damage. Don't get cocky because they can still grab you, and on higher difficulties that can be very lethal. This effectively makes you a frontline character, an ability to hold choke points well, but most damage you receive will cause your marine to stagger and drop his shield. The second ability is Shock Pulse. This immediately stuns nearby enemies and will cause enemies that melee you to become dazed for a time, while enemies hit by this ability take damage over time. This can be morphed into Concussion Pulse, which makes it deal a small amount of damage, has a larger range, and knocks enemies backwards and down for 3 seconds. Yet it doesn't grant buffs to the player anymore. The second morph is Shock Barrier, which takes away the stun from Shock Pulse, and instead the buff it grants will last 12 seconds, giving 33% damage resistance. Stun enemies who attack you a longer time and deals more damage to said attackers. The core passive is known as Bulwark, which will grant you a 3% damage buff that stacks up to 5 times for every time you block damage with your shield. As you can imagine, being in the front and being wary of flanks will keep your damage stacks high while keeping you safe and sound behind your shield. Really, this just makes me interested in seeing some crazy one-man army builds for later difficulties and with a full assortment of perks. As you can see, each class has its own special flavor, and you will miss the abilities of a class when you don't have one present in the party. You can also build your team specifically around synergy between the classes, allowing them to really gear itself up to tackle the challenges posed on harder difficulties. Now the perk system is a bit of an interesting beast, as it isn't just a simple level up and gain additional benefits, but instead you level up which can unlock additional grids on the perk grid, along with more potential perks to slot into said grid. These perks come in 2 color varieties. The first are green, which means they are only usable by a specific class, so Recon unlocks Recon perks and so on. The second unlockable color is blue, which is universal perks that any class can utilize to make their build. There is no limit to the number of perks you can have on your character. As long as you can fit them into the perk grid, you can use them, which allows for some rather interesting Jenga constructions for perk grids to maximize their layout and usage. What this means is that it benefits you to actually level up all classes to get as many different perk choices in it as possible, to create a build that works well for you. The perks as a whole come in 2 flavors, being core perks and modifier perks. The first of which will set up special abilities that modifier perks can build off of, or can even build off of abilities on the perk grid itself located from the left, right, and bottom sides. The only other limitation is that the perks must connect to the specific ability they are modifying, so you can't just slam a bunch of 1-block perks in a corner while keeping 4-block long or square perks in their own area. Weapons are broken into 4 different categories: rifle, CQW, handgun, and heavy. While you can generally get exactly what is in each category, there are a couple surprises that stand out in each of them. Rifles, for example, do not just contain your typical pulse rifles, nor only from the UACM either. They share the slot with designated marksman rifles, DMRs, and sniper rifles. But on top of that, they come from a variety of different companies, RMAT being the most prolific supplier for the Marines, Kramer, a former UPP company that got bought out by RMAT, Weyland-Yutani, who offer up more technologically advanced models, and Hyperdyne, who directly want to compete with WeiYu and stick it to their former partners by making easy-to-manufacture digital weapons that clients can plug into their systems and print out themselves. CQW likewise has some interesting offerings, from pump shotguns to combat shotguns and, a personal favorite of mine, over-under double-barrel shotguns. I just really think that these particular shotguns are absolutely beautiful. This also leads me onto a small tangent. Do not take stats as gospel within the game. As a comparison to the starting shotgun and my love affair, the over-under shotgun, on paper, the over-under shotgun looks way worse. I mean, look at that reload speed and only holds 2 rounds. Well, that reload speed is deceptive, because for the over-under shotgun, it means to go from empty to full, while the standard shotgun is per shell. At any rate, let's move on from those. Then you have submachine gun choices, a nice personal CQW weapon, and flamethrowers. Wait, flamethrowers? Yes, you too can bring the Disco Inferno back to life.
Well done. Oh, well, that happens.
Well, we know who's to blame. Ah! Jerky! Woo!
Doc, I
Where is he?
really hope that
Oh,
wasn't
there he is.
nobody you knew.
Fire is not friendly. Fire is not friendly.
The company never told us about this.
Handgun may make you think of pistols, and there are many in this category ranging from magnums to fully automatic pistols. Yet there's also a short barrel shotgun. Yeah, I think you see what I mean. Finally, we get into heavy weapons. Those glorious room-clearing devices that will make you want to punch anyone playing Demolisher when they drop you with friendly fire for the second time in a mission. Naturally, you have the iconic smart gun, but can also get rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and a double-barrel flamethrower. You know, when you want to make sure anything on the receiving end, including allies, is going to die in seconds and stay dead. The new seasonal DLC also added a new handgun, an assault rifle, a sniper rifle, and a minigun. Yeah, a minigun, though it isn't as amazing as I would have hoped. You aren't the heavy from Team Fortress 2, sadly, but it is still fun to use, and the fire rate will get much faster if you level up the weapon fully. So why am I bothering to tell you about the various weapon types? Well, much like your class, the weapons will also level up when you bring them along on operations, gaining perks and benefits unique to them. Shotguns may get extra projectiles per shell, rifles can have their fire rate increase, pistols may get more weak point damage. It all depends on each weapon, so make sure you check with what they get. It is worth leveling as many weapons as you can to get all the perks and benefits each one of them has, because they carry over to any class you use them on. Meaning you can get an early boost leveling new classes because you leveled and geared the weapons from another class. Speaking of gearing, you can find or purchase attachments for your weaponry, modifying them a bit more towards the playstyle you prefer, or just synergizing with the strengths of your chosen class. You won't need to rely on your weaponry alone, as you can find or purchase additional consumables to bring along with you during a mission. As a welcome bonus, any consumables found but not used during the mission will carry over with you to either the next mission in the chain or back to the UAS Endeavor to be used in future missions as you wish. This means it can be worth taking the risk to not use any so that you can keep them for later missions where you aren't as confident in your chances to survive. These can be turrets, which come in standard, reinforced incendiary, and reinforced electroshock varieties, mines, which come in the same flavors of the turrets, but also get a special cryo-freeze one that instantly freezes an enemy solid for a few seconds before they can then slowly advance as they thaw, ammunition magazines for incendiary and electroshock rounds, and an invulnerability drone that improves weapon damage and range by 25%. The game also has a card system in it. Now, before you freak out, these aren't to actually build your character or to make progress, but instead are to give you added challenges or buffs on a mission. These range in their severity / benefit in ascending order: green cards, blue cards, and purple cards. While I won't go into full details, I will give a few examples of each type. Green cards can be things like Empty Holster. You have no sidearm to use. Completing a mission with this card will grant you 1.5 times as many credits. Ammo Hoarder. Magazine size and maximum ammo are doubled for no bonus. Blue cards tend to be things like No HUD. With the exception of menus, your UI is entirely disabled. Completing the mission will net you 2.25 times credits and experience. Or if you get lucky, stuff like Extraordinary Weaponry. Your weapons deal 35% more damage for no bonus at all. Purple cards have some of my favorite debuffs for rewards, with my favorite being I Made a Bad Call. Your primary weapon, secondary weapon, kit abilities, and consumables are disabled. but you have your side armor at least. If you manage to succeed in this insane challenge, you'll get 4 times the experience and a bonus reward at the end. Now that I think about it, that challenge card in the green slot I mentioned, in combination with a fully leveled minigun, gives me some evil ideas. To get more challenge cards, purchase consumables, some new weapons, some perks, or even emotes, colors, and skins, you can use the armory. Don't panic that there are 2 currency types, both earned through regular play. The first allows you to purchase legal items, with the armorer joking that if you want illegal things, it's no problem, he can get them easily, but if you want to buy the legal goods, he needs you to fill out some paperwork. Weapons, consumables, and perks are in the standard requisition supply, while things like challenge cards, emotes, and skins are in the off-the-book supply, as they are unnecessary or frivolous items for operations. So, given some of these challenges, what sort of enemies will you be facing? The Xenomorphs are the primary antagonists within Aliens Fireteam Elite. I would say, what'd you expect, but given a lot of Aliens games tend to devolve into fighting the company mooks, and since, I'm glad the Xenos are the primary threat. When facing off against the Xenos, or any enemies, you'll need to pay attention to your motion tracker, which will give you a ping for every enemy heading your way or moving around in general. These are color coordinated depending on their threat level to the player, with white being standard, green being specialist, and orange being elite. The standard Xenomorph Horde that will attack you are runners, which made their debut in Aliens 3 and are spawned from wildlife becoming impregnated by facehuggers. So how are there so many on Katanga Refinery Station? Well, we'll get to that when we talk about the story. Sharing the white tracker dot for Xenomorphs are facehuggers, meaning they can hide within a massive swarm if you haven't been careful or paying attention to egg placements. The specialists within the Xenomorph Horde are the Prowlers, who attempt to jump on you and dig out your ribcage while you're still using it. These Xenomorphs also like to set up ambushes, hiding around corners or in the ceiling and staying still as not to trigger your motion tracker, but will breathe heavily, giving away their position to attentive players. Do not get pounced on. On higher difficulties, you will regret life. Spitters are a ranged threat, which, as the name implies, will attempt to cough a big glob of acid at you, knocking you back and leaving a very dangerous puddle of acid behind, meaning they can effectively act as an area denial for any sort of marine defense, which can be followed up by the next specialist, Bursters, who are filled with acid, yet they don't try to kill themselves to explode. Instead, they try to stick next to you and slash at you while you shoot at them, causing them to get revenge when they die. Essentially, keep Bursters at range as best you can, and before getting the kill, dive away from them. Rounding out the specialists are drones, the usual xenomorph life created from an infected human, and they are rare, which fits with some later discoveries in the story. These are also the most dangerous of the specialists, as they will dart directly to a target, jump on them and slash at their face a few times before beating a retreat, diving into a vent to hunt you once again. They'll even decide to call off an attack if you do enough damage, but just know they will be back to try and finish the job, so you need to get heavy firepower into them and finish them off quick. Elites are when the team really needs to focus and work together to take down the threat, with the first variant you'll encounter being the Warrior. These are slower moving than the drone, but with far more health and a nasty combo attack, along with a grab that can be very lethal if not dealt with quickly. Crushers, yes, those kind from Colonial Marines, are essentially mobile battering rams with a thickly armored head crest that can't be penetrated and generally no true weaknesses on their body at all. But they don't have any grapple attacks and are mostly to knock the players around, dig them out of entrenched locations, and act as a damage sponge to let the other xenomorphs get in and do work. They do have a nasty running dive that will knock you flat on your ass, but at least they aren't Praetorians, the guardians of the hive, second only to the Queen and boasting incredible damage. While they do have an obvious weak spot on their chest because of the molting from their drone forms, they still have a lot of health, and their head crest is just as durable as the Crusher's own. Essentially, keep as far away from these guys as possible and do not get grabbed. Yet the Xenomorph Horde aren't the only threats. After all, Weyland-Yutani had a lab called Polystation on LV-895, which naturally means... Ah yes, Weyland-Yutani, up to their old tricks once again and finding themselves right in the thick of things. To an extent, but we'll discuss that later. Trust me, it goes a bit more in depth than that. So, what has the company put in place to hinder your progress? Well, white dot threats for Weyland-Yutani can be Seegson working Joe synths, Yes, really, they're gonna come up and fix that notion in your head with their wrench real fast. Synth guards who wield assault rifles or shotguns. As a note, the synths can also have mines and turrets set up around the area, so keep your eyes peeled for either of these threats. Green dots for the synthetics represent the Warden, who has armor and can throw grenades to flush players out of cover, detonators that are headless synths that attempt to run up to you and explode, which will do an incredibly significant amount of damage, so deal with them rapidly. Snipers will target a specific player, and after focusing on them for a while, can take a precision shot to shave off a massive amount of health. Essentially, watch out for a laser sight starting to focus on you. Containment synths that wield riot shields that are bulletproof, save for a viewport for their optics, and naturally, should you get around them. You can also stumble them to knock the shield out of the way to leave them exposed if you don't feel like trying to hit the viewport or strafing around them. Finally, the elites for the synth come in two flavors of pain. The first being a heavy synth, which is armed with a machine gun and a shoulder-mounted rocket system. Wait a second, did they steal that from the Demolisher? Yeah, essentially, you're fighting the Demolisher in synthetic form. The other elite is the Incinerator, who has a pressurized flamethrower with a large tank on his back and can throw out incendiary grenades to act as area denial systems to stop players from going into that area. With how lethal fire is, this is a very effective moment of don't stand in the bad. To take out this synth, focus your fire on the fuel and oxygen tanks on their back and let them turn into a giant fireball. Yet even still, these are not the only enemies you will face, and it's time to talk about my least favorite enemies to fight. I'm just gonna say it. Nobody can stop me. Prometheus was a mistake. It's nothing but trash. Pathogen are mutated creatures that come in only 3 varieties. Thankfully, and only in 2 motion tracker colors, and only a single mission, but they are going to ensure you remember them. White dots are for husks, which are humans that have been mutated by pathogen and have slight visual difference between scientists and security personnel. Think Left 4 Dead zombies, except every single one of them hits like a tank. Very dangerous to be swarmed by, so keep your head on a swivel and ensure you have high damage weaponry to put them down quickly. The second white dots are for poppers, which will remind you of Half-Life headcrabs, or rather, a mix between fast and regular headcrabs, who explode on contact, dealing decent damage, and can crawl along the walls and ceilings. What makes them a threat is they come in massive swarms, with some of the smallest being at least 10 strong. Lastly, in the orange dots are the Leon 895, originally 6-limbed cats that had chameleon-like abilities. The pathogen boosted that chameleon trait to 11, making them literally cloak, though not perfectly, and mutating 2 of those limbs into strong talons. It also splits their face open with tentacles, so, you know, they look just adorable. Very much a threat, though thankfully stuff like pups, shocked coils, and the like can keep the Leon marked even when in stealth, allowing you to hammer away at it and bring it down. Just do not get pounced on. These are way more lethal than anything else. And thankfully, that is it. That is it for the gameplay section. Onwards and upwards we go. You may be wondering why I'm waiting so long to talk about this in the video. Well, I felt it was only appropriate to give the game as much time on screen as possible to really showcase what it is and what it has to offer in terms of the visual design and aesthetics of the world. I feel it's safe to say that Cold Iron absolutely knocked this aspect out of the park. The small detail work throughout the game is absolutely fantastic, and while this won't be confused for some brand new AAA release with all the bells and whistles attached, it doesn't look bad at all. Enemy types are easy to distinguish from one another, even within hordes, like bursters having bright glowing spots, spitters having tendrils changing their profile, prowlers being in red, drones and warriors standing fully upright, crushers being large and with a massive head crest, praetorians running with a strange hopping animation, as well as being larger than everything else, and standing upright when they get into combat range. It even extends to the synths. Rifle synths have the majority of their body, weapon, and armor all white. Shotgun variants have black jumpsuits and light armor. Wardens have officer caps and yellow highlights on their armor. Working Joes wear vibrant orange jumpsuits. You see where I'm going with this? There was some serious thought put into the design of these enemies, above and beyond just being combatants in a swarm. This extends into the world design as well. After all, each of the 4 campaigns does have similar elements, and even pieces, but wildly spirals into different environments. Operation 1 will give you extreme Nostromo and Hadley's Hope vibes, while Operation 2 works in visuals from Prometheus and Alien vs. Predator. Operation 3 is based entirely around ruins transitioning into the alien starship we see from Alien, within lots of curves and organic metal feel to everything, and Operation 4 is straight out of the Aliens movie while you delve into the hive itself. Again, in keeping with small details, each corporation has its own flavor of design for its weaponry as well. Like you can always tell a Wei-Yu weapon apart from an Armat, or the more black and angular look of the Hyperdyne stuff. Kramer even gets its own unique looks, but shares the Armat color scheme, because the company is now owned by Armat. And it's these little touches that I really appreciate. Overall, I think they did a fantastic job in this category, and I hope I've shown enough to you to back up that claim. I would say this is easily one of the highlights of the game, especially the sound work for the weapons, which I would say, outside a couple of examples, are all excellently done. With standouts being the M41A2 pulse rifle and the smart gun, which... why am I even talking about this? Let's just roll some footage. And for the opposite end of the spectrum, or what I consider the opposite end, one of the weapons that very much doesn't work for me is the L-36 Halberd, which just kind of sounds like a Mass Effect gun. I mean, here, have a listen. Wait, I've got it. You know what it sounds like. It sounds like the Aldari weapons from Dawn of War. Now this isn't just a showcase of weaponry, but even the hostiles you'll be fighting. Working Joes will speak in their stilted droning and reference doing work or activating repairs, just on you, the player. Xenomorphs have the iconic high-pitched screech when taking damage. Each of the special and elite types will give out different calls, alerting you to their presence within a horde before your motion tracker even picks them up. Prowlers will heavily breathe, cluing attentive players in on the fact that there's an ambush set up nearby. Seriously, well done, Cold Iron, though I dock you 200 arbitrary points for having the Marines call out, "I hear a Prowler. Ambush ahead." You hear that? Every now and then when a Prowler is nearby. Let players be punished for not paying attention. Naturally, this is only a partial jab, but I like that there are already enough tells for the situation that the call-out isn't needed. As for the voice work itself, it's alright. I don't think there is one that stands out as being terrible at all, and there is some good flavor work in the dialogue, like when Esther, the battalion support synthetic, who has more of a stilted way of speaking than everyone else, it's just slightly off from the rest of the crew. Also, yes, we'll talk about the lip sync thing later. Don't worry, I will bring it up. There isn't anyone that I could point to as objectively horrible, and there are even a lot of good, humorous voice lines with great comedic timing. It really does feel like a unit of Marines that know the hell they are going into and are trying to make the best of a shitty situation they have been dealt. Now, the music has a bit more of a mixed reaction from the player base. For myself, I don't mind the fact that they tried to recreate the feel of the Alien soundtrack, since they couldn't get the rights to said soundtrack anyways, and that it is far more atmospheric overall, though when it needs to, it certainly kicks into high gear. There's been a lot of work put into this soundtrack, like a lot of work. I also want to mention getting the soundtrack for this game was a journey, to say the least, so let's do some music listening. If you want to avoid spoilers, go to the following timestamp, or check the timeline in the bottom for the next main segment. This game has a rather standard alien story, which can be a good thing for a co-op horde shooter, but if you want to experience the story yourself, then by all means skip ahead. Are they gone? Well, let's not keep the Queen Mother waiting any longer. The Colonial Marines aboard the Endeavour receive a distress call from a Dr. Honecker, who has requested the direct protection of the Marines under the Colonial Protection Act. As the Endeavour comes into system, they aren't greeted by anyone else, thus heightening their suspicion that something dire has happened. The suspicions are confirmed when they find Dr. Honecker's PDT chip cut out of him and sitting near a room with a lot of acid damage, and any thoughts of this being a simple operation go out the window when the Xenomorphs show up, and the operation kicks into high gear to find whatever remains of Dr. Honecker. Shockingly, Dr. Honecker turns out to be alive, and has been surprisingly successful in evading the Xenomorphs, setting traps and sealing different areas to keep himself safe. When he gets into contact with the Marines, he immediately asks if they have arrested anyone in line with his report. This catches the Marines off guard, but they play it off as they can't talk about ongoing investigations. While working your way towards Honecker, he warns about a special xenomorph drone named Monica, who is black and white striped drone. This is when your team will start running into Monica, and can finally put her out of Honecker's misery. Once you reach the Doctor, it's time to evacuate him to the Endeavour, yet naturally things are never quite so simple, as the dropship couldn't land in the main hangar and instead went into a secondary hangar, which triggered a lockdown, so the pilot will need you to lift the lockdown so anyone can leave. Yet as you pass through the main hangar, you discover a damaged Weyland-Yutani shuttle, along with several dead creatures and some destroyed combat synths. Honecker reveals that the company was capturing wildlife on LV-895 and bringing it up to Katanga Refinery from Paula Station to infect them and harvest xenomorphs for experimentation. This immediately clues in the Marines that there is a queen alive and well aboard the refinery, and she will need to be dealt with eventually. First, though, you need to escape from the refinery and get Honecker into the hands of the Marines so they can debrief and get information from him. It's time to head down to LV-895, specifically Paula Station, to recover any survivors and information on what the hell Weyland-Yutani has been up to. Once landing, you are contacted by Cynthia Rodriguez, who is the head of security for the company, and stresses that we are trespassing on company property. Well, the Colonial Protection Act gets us over that hurdle, and Cynthia says she needs to contact the company for instructions and ask the Marines to evacuate. While advancing, you'll find that the company has been thoroughly studying ruins they have found on LV-895, and using the xenomorphs on Katanga Refinery in their experiments. While this seems crazy, there is actually a reason for this. It's still crazy, but at least there is a reason. Cynthia once again urges the Marines to fall back, stating everyone is secure and safe in Paula Station. Naturally, the Marines aren't buying this, and are curious as to why Cynthia is so determined to keep the Marines away. At the same time, Esther, the Marine Battalion Support Synth, is curious about Weyland-Yutani starting to actually decipher the alien language from these ruins, and even integrating human technology into this alien technology. Cynthia again attempts to dissuade the Marines, and once again declares that everyone here is safe. Yet as the Marines keep pushing forward, she becomes more annoyed and exhausted when urging them to fall back, eventually stating there are only synths here, and that the Marines are just putting themselves in danger. This culminates when Cynthia reveals her true name, SNTHYA, a Weyland-Yutani AI who has been trying to save the Marines, but also ordering all the synths to kill them if they keep advancing. While seemingly a contradiction of the three laws, Esther will actually state that there is a zeroth law that allows all other laws to be ignored if doing so is for the sole purpose of saving humanity as a whole. While the Marines now have to deal with and shut down the AI's cores, they question how no one on Paula Station knew that there was an AI, with Honecker even saying he met and spoke to Colonel Cynthia Rodriguez, suggesting the company had an advanced synthetic body made for the AI to pilot like a puppet. Once shutting down her final course, Cynthia gives a final warning that only Weyland-Yutani can deal with the threat they found on LV-895, and the Marines should absolutely not delve deeper into these ruins for their own safety and that of humanity as a whole. Turns out that Cynthia sent out one last message to synthetic security around Paula Station, and somehow triggered something she called Asset Zero, which is now giving off gravitational anomalies across the station, thus forcing the Marines to delve in deeper. This also requires the Marines to scan carvings so that Esther can help decipher what they need to do to advance deeper into the complex, After all, a lot of the doors are locked with alien technology. At first this involves fighting some synths and a lot of xenomorphs, the infestation seemingly getting worse and worse as you advance before you come to an access room, where the architecture begins to change rather dramatically. When transitioning into the new area, the environment becomes much less angular and far more smooth and curvy. This actually gets Dr. Honecker excited, as he was never privy to such ruins, but he was very much made aware of what these ruins contain. Pathogen containers, which the company had used to experiment on a few native life forms, and even some xenomorphs, which was a bad call, especially given Monica. Yet it was ultimately in service to fighting the pathogen, understanding how it works so they can create countermeasures against it. This is also when you discover that Asset Zero is a starship that is powering up and set to travel to Weyland-Yutani Lab 13 on Gateway Station, which is orbiting Earth. Yeah, imagine if one of those pathogen containers or xenomorph accidentally gets on Earth. Naturally, the Marines are horrified at this plan, and a new objective is to do everything you can to stop the ship from leaving LV-895. Yet when entering said ship, a horrifying new discovery is made. Cynthia opens some of the pathogen containers to infect the remaining scientists, researchers, and security personnel of Paula Station, turning them into monsters to slow the Marines down long enough to guarantee the ship can take off. This is where many of the life forms from the planet get infected as well, and while the air is safe to breathe now, since it took a long time to wade through the xenomorphs towards the ship, it also means it is absolutely overrun with pathogen abominations. Fortunately for humanity, the Marines managed to battle their way into the ship's power room and terminate its systems before it can take flight, and the UAS Endeavour begins setting up quarantine operations on the area, just in case the ship somehow can repair itself. Now that the threat Asset Zero posed is dealt with, it's time to take the fight to the Xenomorph Hive and destroy it once and for all on Katanga Refinery. Colonel Ship, the commanding officer of the UAS Endeavour, has already had Marines maintain a foothold aboard the refinery and been heavily reinforcing them with munitions and turrets to prep for this operation. 2 fire teams are selected. Yours will provide support and help reinforce various locations of heightened xenomorph activity, while Blue Team will push straight through into the hive and set the refinery plant to self-destruct, thus cleaning the Xenomorph Hive while keeping enough evidence for the UACM to nail Weyland-Yutani to the wall. Sadly, things begin going sideways. Not only is the Xenomorph defense far more fierce than expected, and they expected a lot because of the sheer volume of transfers from Paula Station to Katanga, but Blue Team is specifically targeted by the Hive. This leads to Blue Team going dark and changing your mission from support to search and rescue, as you now follow in the wake of Blue Team's advance. This will see you up against the strongest threats the Hive can muster, and far more brutal fighting than anywhere else, with Xenomorphs even clambering out of the walls to try and stop you. Unfortunately, you are just too late to save the last member of Blue Team, and with that knowledge, it is now up to you to overload the refinery core.
Press the button marked Shock Beam Excess.
Back to the elevator, move!
Mommy's very angry.
Party, we're burning to escape debris scatter.
It was a hard-fought battle, and the Marines lost many lives, but you have successfully destroyed the Hive. Though Colonel Ship knows that the Xenomorphs will soon molt a new queen, for now things are settled, and your lieutenant explains why the Colonel was in such a rush. The UACM is very aware that there are multiple ships making their way towards LV-895 with all haste. The company is coming. Likely their competitors as well that could capitalize on the PR disaster this could be spun into, and thus the Colonel could not afford to wait for reinforcements from the UAS vessels. As they put it, if they had waited by the time the other UACM arrived, they would already be drowning in lawyers and PMCs. For now, it's time to stand down and prepare for what comes next once Weyland-Yutani and the others show up. So as you can see, it's a pretty simple and straightforward story within the Aliens universe. but I don't think a bad one. While it doesn't break too far out and go into crazy depth, there are a lot of interesting implications and foreshadowing for future events that take place in the extended canon and comics universe. Overall, not bad, Cold Iron. Not bad at all. With all this in mind, would I recommend Aliens Fireteam Elite? Well, absolutely, though with some obvious caveats. The game isn't a full AAA's price, and thus is an easier pitch to people. Should you have a couple friends that want to take the plunge, then this is an easy game to get into and have several hours of fun in. The only shame of it is the lack of content, which can easily be rectified, and I certainly wish Cold Iron luck. The level of detail and care put into this game have made it a solid foundation for future work. If they get a good content pipeline in place and can keep giving people more things to do in the game, up to a critical mass, I see this game as having great staying power. Here's a final breakdown. I think it's safe to say that someone, or a lot of people on the team, are truly fans of this universe. While it may not have been the original intention to create an Aliens game, it is clear the team put their all into delivering on the world with incredible atmosphere and detail work all throughout the product. It truly feels like a lived-in part of a larger universe, and the amusing cast of characters that inhabit the UAS Endeavor come off feeling more like actual people, with the usual military cheese sprinkled on top. Thankfully, no Urata Ashes nonsense. Yet it is perhaps the sound design that will most stick with players, ranging from the iconic examples like the Pulse Rifle Smart Gun, Alien Screeches, and the like, to new entries like Prowler's Breathing, the Cries of Praetorians, or brand new weapons to experience. That same dedication to get things right shows, or rather is heard. This even extends into the music. And while some view it as a disappointment, I feel like the music does a great job to capture the atmosphere and feel of the films, while keeping things dynamic enough to cater to the situation at hand. Slow and ambient during the lulls, and with driving brass sections for the intense action moments. The combat in the game just feels good. Mowing down hundreds of Xenomorphs as the tide slowly pushes closer and closer just has a great sense to it. It's hard to put into words, but the feedback from kills, with headshots even getting a musical sting to accent them, just adds more to the proceedings. Even fighting other enemies like the Synths and Pathogen, which, while the latter are not my favorite, still throw a new challenge into the mix and make you consider builds specific for dealing with them. Honestly, if they just get more missions to play, new Horde maps, and continue the story, I think there will be enough to satisfy a large portion of its players. Releasing as a $40 game, while many game companies are pushing to make $70 the new standard, is a great relief to see. It's a far more reasonable price to pay for the entire package, with only some cosmetic goodies hidden behind a more expensive edition of the game. This also goes into the future monetization of the title. As they have stated, core assets and features will never be locked away behind a paywall, and only cosmetics will require more cash for those who wish to purchase them. Well, first and foremost, and being very anecdotal, the game just isn't that buggy for me. I know, trust me, I've seen some bugs and glitches on my own end, yet always minor and infrequent. I've only experienced a single crash in over 80 hours of gameplay, yet there are people that have immense problems with this game and getting it running, so I'm not crazy enough to say it is perfectly stable and playable. This is very much a your mileage may vary moment, so know that going in ahead of time. Next, the game does have issues, yet I don't think there are any core problems. There isn't something I see that would require gutting entire systems or outright removing missions to fix things. These issues and additions can be solved with small patches. Stuff like fixing weapon reload animations, fixing sound bugs, and adding the ability to save perk loadouts. That last one in particular would make a large difference in planning builds for specific threats you're going to face. Oh, and almost stream of conscience writing here, I did experience a brand new bug in the latest patch in which all the weapons I owned were automatically bumped up to 4-star completion. I mean, I wasn't that far off from doing it myself, but, thanks, benevolent bug? We also need a clear indication of intent from the developers. Can we trust that Cold Iron will support this title into the future? As it stands, there is only a limited amount of content which can be blasted through quickly. And while I think the general feel and combat in the game is good enough to bring me back to try on harder difficulties and with new builds, I'm not everyone. So a steady supply of new content, and I mean beyond just the new class and weapons, should absolutely be a priority. There have been a few hints dropped that the company and its rivals are on their way to LV-895. The ruins, the pathogen, and the ship are too much of a discovery for everyone to ignore. So far, the newest content that has been added has been cosmetics for cash and a new class, weapons and perks absolutely free for everyone. This feels like a good compromise to me. It won't split the player base, separate out who has access to what characters, and allows Cold Iron to increase cash flow and keep the game and their studio alive longer. As for the most visually obvious issue, the lip sync, or rather the lack of lip syncing at all, I see some benefits to this and some negatives. Naturally, it's very jarring not to see anyone opening their mouth to speak, but on the flip side, as a developer, you can more easily slot in dialogue and voice lines without needing to worry about animating each one for different languages, so it saves you development time overall. This is understandable for a while, but I do really hope lip sync will come into the game in the future. It just adds more polish to the overall product. Cold Iron are a complete unknown within the industry, and this is their first game on the market. This can make a lot of people wary, and I know I have this in the bad section, but it can be a strike against the title. I personally feel they have proven themselves, but if you prefer something from a more established company that can prove they will still be around a year down the line, that I fully understand. Overall, I hope I've done enough to give you the information to decide whether to purchase this game or not. After all, it's your money and your time that will be put into the game, and only you can truly make that judgment call. For me, I have enjoyed my time with the game, and do hope that Cold Iron will continue to put such care and attention into this title in the future.
Yeah, but what about a real spicy take?
What do you mean a real spicy take?
Well, since you recommended a game that is lacking content, give us one of your spiciest hot takes.
Spicy, huh? Okay, Skyrim is an objectively bad game.
No, I said spiciest.
Okay, fine. I think Doom 2016 is better than Eternal.
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the spice I'm looking for.
If you want to know why I give the thoughts I do, feel free to follow me on Twitch over at SetchDressCar, and subscribe to the channel. Who knows, I may make a video on why I talk about some of the other games the way I do. Well, one may already be in the works.